Hi, welcome to our second game of our Christmas Waterloo series. And we're playing, as we've trailed, Neys Assault on the ridgeline in Waterloo. So D'Erlon's assault has been completed and pushed back, and now Ney is utilising the French heavy cavalry to try and pin the British and break the British position. So here you can see the French assault that's about to go in. This is from the General d'Armée scenario that was in the Lardy handbook. I have looked it up now. It was, I think, 2019 it was in there. So what we got for the French? Well, we've got a couple of infantry brigades. First one of 5 battalions down here, and across the other side on their left flank we've got a 2nd brigade of 4 further battalions.
The thing is about this...
And we've got a heavy artillery battery, part of the Grand Battery here, a battery of 12-pounders and a battery of 6-pounders. And then we've got the main French assault force. We've got a heavy cavalry division. 1st Division has got a brigade of dragoons, supported by a brigade of cuirassiers. And then we have a 2nd brigade with the carabiniers, everyone's favourites in their fabulous light blue, sky blue uniforms, supported by a 2nd brigade of cuirassiers. So that force is going against the Allied line.
The one main thing about the bad thing about the French forces, they can't get their infantry up quick enough because the cavalry, which are far ahead, are blocking them from going in.
Yeah, well, we'll see how we manage that. Facing off against the French, we have a brigade of Brunswickers, Black Brunswickers here, line infantry, 3 battalions of line infantry, supported by a British foot artillery battery. And they also have the Brunswick Hussars and Lancers as a cavalry brigade in reserve. And as we move across the table, we've got a 2nd British Brigade on the table. I'll just go around to the other side so we can get a better look at it. Again, supported by a foot artillery battery with some skirmishers from the 95th Rifles. And then we have the 95th Rifles themselves, and the 52nd Oxfordshire Light Infantry, a large battalion there. And then it's the 71st Highland Light Infantry, supporting them. In reserve, we have a British Light Cavalry Brigade, Hussars and Light Dragoons. And then we have a 2nd Brigade. This one's got light dragoons and somewhat unhistorically, so apologies for that. We have a heavy dragoon regiment as well. So following the D'Erlon battle, if you've watched that video, you've seen that the French were thrown back. Wasn't a clear victory for the Allies, but the British heavy cavalry were not destroyed. So as a result of that, we've used some of those forces that fought in that battle against D'Erlon. And indeed the heavy dragoons were not damaged at all. They took no casualties in their battle, so they're available for use by the British in this game. And I need all the help I'm going to get. I can get, as Charlie has decided that he is going to take on the mantle of Napoleon and Ney in this particular case. He has a passion for fighting as the old guard in our final scenario. So watch out for the British. We may have an atypical result for Waterloo, as we have Commander Charlie in charge of the French forces this afternoon. Alright, we'll crack on with the game with the first turn and ADCs. Okay, so we both rolled 3 ADCs, and Charlie has seen the light and decided that actually he'd rather play as the British. So he's taken the 3 ADCs I've rolled and has applied them to the British, and he's put artillery assault on his English British battery there on the hill. The French have also gone for artillery assault, so we're going to do some counter battery fire in this very first turn, I imagine, as the French try and whittle down the defensive position of the British before their cavalry get into contact. Alright, we'll roll for activation. I'll roll the French, we'll do them on camera. So starting with our large cavalry brigade is active. Our small cavalry brigade is hesitant. My left-hand infantry brigade is hesitant, and my right-hand infantry brigade is hesitant. Not great for the French, so we'll be on -3.
What about your artillery?
And then I will roll for my artillery, which has got a reroll, which it needs. Come on, let's not go. No! Hesitant
Yes.
again! Disaster. So
Minus
4.
four.
-4, and only the large cavalry brigade is not hesitant. Alright, Charlie, let's roll for activation for
Makes
the
sense if we
allies.
don't want to attack squares anymore. So, my cavalry brigade, active. This,
Infantry brigade with the artillery assault,
active. The second cavalry brigade, active.
Yeah,
The infantry up there,
yeah.
active. My last cavalry brigade,
Which is the Brunswickers.
active. It's opposite for you. They're all active.
Right, let's roll for activation. I'm on -4. I think this looks like it could be an allied. I roll 8, -4 is 4. Charlie gets 11. Alright, so the allies will start. We'll do movement in turn 1. Okay, so at the end of turn 1, the allies have been relatively immobile. The Brunswickers have decided to take caution to heart and have already formed square. Probably a good idea given that they're just reservists, so they put a lower discipline test.
And I'd rather not have to do discipline tests to try and form square.
Yeah. Whereas Charlie hasn't done that yet with his British battalions over on the other flank, but he has pulled back with his skirmishers and done some minor adjustments with his cavalry brigades. For the French, the first and only active French cavalry brigade has started advancing towards the British lines.
Active brigade in the whole French army right now.
The only active brigade, as Charlie says. Alright, Charlie, do you want to get on with your shooting?
Yeah, oh,
So your skirmishers...
You can't shoot because your artillery's out of range.
My artillery is at long range, and being hesitant means it can't fire. So Charlie, your skirmishers, if they were in the open as they were before, couldn't fire at cavalry, because they can't do that. But given that you've fallen back behind that hedge line, you can open fire with your skirmishers, assuming they're within range.
So,
and you've got your artillery batteries.
So 3 dice, plus 1 because they're
95th.
95th rifles.
Yep.
Anything else?
No, that's it. So needing 5s.
1 casualty.
1 casualty. Alright.
So,
I'll mark that on this dice for a second and we'll do the unit in a minute.
2 blue dice.
Yep, for your artillery assault. Okay. And then artillery assault. And I think effective range, I think that looks
Close.
like more than 12.
I think it's
Do
close.
you want to measure it, Charlie? Because check it's within 15 as well, otherwise the skirmishers couldn't have fired. But I think that looks like 15.
That looks like 12. It looks like more 12.
Oh,
barely.
Just out an
So
effective
The
range.
skirmish should definitely be in range, yeah.
Yeah, well, because they're rifles, they've got a 15-inch range. Yeah, they would be. Do you want to get me the tables, Charlie? They're over there by the candle.
Oh, do they count as a column, the cavalry?
No, they're just in line.
Oh, wouldn't I get another dice because they're like compact?
No, they're not. They're not in column. I have to make them deeper formation than that. It's just I always do a double line for my cavalry units. I just think it looks cool. All right, so at effective range, off you go, Charlie.
11 and another casualty.
11 is 3 casualties, so that'll be 4 casualties. That'll be up to 5 casualties, and a discipline test. And do you want to roll a bounce through for the artillery that was following up behind them?
Nothing.
No.
But
All right, so that was 4 casualties and 1 from the skirmishers, and we'll do the discipline test. So they are veterans, so this will be a +1 for being veterans, but -1 for 4 casualties.
Right.
11, they're fine.
And
All
so
right.
my second battery?
What, this one down here?
Medium range, most likely, I think.
I think that's at long range, Charlie. That'll definitely more than 24 inches.
I'm going to check. 24. 24 is quite long.
Yeah, it is quite long, but I think they're... Yeah, too many years of wargaming. I'm quite good at guessing distances. 24 inches, so that'll be at long range for that battery. 6, so that's half a casualty. You're firing against one of the carabiniers, yeah?
Casualty and
Okay,
bounce
and a
through.
bounce through.
Casualty.
Alright, we'll mark those casualties up on the French. Alright, moving on to turn 2, we'll roll for ADCs.
For me,
5 dice.
For me, hopefully your ADCs are the same and your rolls are the same, so you'll get hesitant again.
Not so great. But I have got 4 ADCs this time, a little bit better. And Charlie, 5 dice. And then 1 for your off table. No.
3 again.
3, okay, let's allocate our
I'm doing
ADC.
this.
So Charlie's done the same with his ADCs. He's again put artillery assault with a reroll on the British brigade. The French have decided to be more conservative this time, so we've got rerolls on both of our front cavalry brigades and a reroll on our first
It's good
infantry
and
brigade.
bad because you're going close range or medium range now.
Yeah, so rolling for my large heavy cavalry is active. My other heavy cavalry is active. My infantry brigade with the reroll
Hesitant.
is hesitant. My other infantry brigade is active. And then my artillery brigade is also hesitant and can't fire again. Doesn't look like my artillery is going to be taking much part in this battle. So I've got, what was that, Charlie? Was that both my infantry brigades were hesitant?
Infantry and artillery.
Okay, so that's a -3 for the French.
-2.
One for each brigade and one for the artillery.
No, you failed with the artillery and you failed with 1 infantry.
Oh, what? So the second infantry brigade is active, is it? Okay.
No, the first one is active, the reroll.
Oh, right, okay. All right, cool. Charlie, let's roll for your Brunswickers.
So my cavalry, hesitant, my infantry, active.
6 o'clock.
All right. The light cavalry brigade in the middle.
Hesitant.
The British brigade.
Active. It doesn't want as much for me.
Yeah, and then the other cavalry brigade.
Active my artillery, artillery assault.
No, the artillery is part of the British brigade, so
Okay.
you've already activated it. So how many hesitants did you get, Charlie?
2.
2, which were the...
This one and this.
that one. All right. So we're both at -2. Let's roll for initiative. 4 for the French. 10 for the British. We'll put the hesitant markers on, and then we'll do movement. Okay, so the cuirassiers have moved forward from the French line. They've charged the gun battery. The 2nd Cuirassier Regiment's gone up in support. The 95th Rifles are forced to retire in the face of being charged by a formed unit. They did fail their discipline test, so they've taken 2 casualties, wasn't it, Charlie? And have fallen back behind the 52nd Oxfordshire. We're now going to do defensive chat fire. Now, please let me know if you think this is right. Charlie has artillery assault on this unit, which means they are able to fire at an increased volume of firepower. I've just rechecked the charge reactions, and it just says units do defensive fire. It doesn't say of what sort and whether you can or can't use your artillery assault bonus. My presumption is they have been activated with artillery assault, so I'm going to give them the artillery assault bonus as they try and fend off the attacking French cuirassiers. So this will be a close range volley, Charlie, with artillery assault. What do you get?
3.
Nothing. That'll do nothing, and anything from the artillery assault? Okay, so nothing from that. All right, let's now do our charge results. We'll just work out the modifiers and be back in a second. All right, let's roll off for the combat. We're both on +1. I get +1 for heavy cavalry and +1 for being a veteran, but -1 for the casualties. Charlie's artillery are also veterans, so he is on +1. Let's roll the combat result, or the charge results.
Why are you rolling 3 dice?
I'm not, I'm rolling 2. Oh, that's cocked. So 3 and 4 is 7 for the French.
6.
All right, let's have a look. So, in cavalry versus
You win by
artillery.
1. You just win by 1.
I win by 1. I'm melee with Alan. You melee unformed. Okay, so good results for the French. They have charged home against the artillery battery and have got Alan. So that
They do take a casualty.
They do take a casualty, which I'll mark up for having to go through the hedge. So they're now on 6 casualties, which won't help, but they're hitting the British artillery battery. All right, now let's get on with normal movement. Charlie's go first. Okay, so we've done movement on turn 2. The French Carabiniers and their colleagues, their cuirassier support. The cuirassier support have dropped back a little bit to make sure they don't suffer any bounce through from fire against the Carabiniers. They're moving up to threaten this British foot artillery battery on this point of the hill. In the centre, the dragoons have stormed up to the top of the ridge. And in the distance there you can see their cuirassier colleagues who charge the other British artillery battery. And as we look back, the French infantry are now starting to roll forward. On the Allied side, all of the Allied units have now formed square, and Charlie's started positioning his cavalry for potential counterattacks, but he's waiting for the French cavalry charges to stutter against the squares before he unleashes the British cavalry, I think. Alright, on we go with firing in turn 2. Okay, Charlie's opened fire with his artillery battery. He rolled with great speed, so he beat me from a camera work perspective. He scores 1 casualty on the Carabiniers. Let's do the hand-to-hand combat then, Charlie, over on the other side of the table. Rolling this combat. So
I only get 4 dice. And
Charlie gets 4 and the French get quite a lot. Well there's a chance. I've only caused 3 casualties, Charlie. You caused none. I win by 3. I think that's the end of the artillery. We'll apply that and then get on with the next turn. Okay, so we've allocated ADCs and everyone went for rerolls. The British actually managed to get 6 ADCs, but despite that, both Bun's brigades, despite being having command rerolls on them, both went hesitant. So the British are rolling at -2. For the French, good news, they had only 3 ADCs, which went off on the 2 heavy cavalry brigades and the left-hand infantry brigade, but actually all of their ADC rolls were successful. So this will be a test at -2 for the Allies. Allies get 12. Allies get initiative. That's good news for them. All right, we'll crack on with charges in turn 3. Okay, so the cavalry melee is heating up here in the centre. So the cuirassiers on the left have stayed on the hilltop to keep the British infantry in squares, hoping their infantry supports will be able to start putting pressure on in due course. In the centre, the dragoons realised they had an opportunity and have charged into the British light dragoons that are facing opposite them, and they've thrown their general in, so we'll see how that charge result goes. And on the far flank, the Carabiniers have indeed charged the British artillery battery that was sitting on the hill. Let's see if their defensive volley can do any better than their colleagues on the other flank did. Alright, we'll do defensive fire for the British artillery. So just a normal battery fire at close range. They do better, they get a 9. Now let's just have a look at what a 9 is. So close range is 3 casualties and a discipline test on the Carabiniers. And this will be a discipline test at least -1 because of the number of casualties taken, but they are veterans, so a straight off roll. They've rolled a 5, so they go unformed. Okay, so rolling for this combat, we've got a charge test here for the Carabiniers as they charge into this British infantry. Let's have a look at the modifiers. Okay, so the modifiers for the French aren't so great here. So it starts pretty well, so they get +1 for being veteran, they get +1 for being heavy cavalry, and then the penalties start ranking up. They lose 2 for being unformed. +1 for veteran, +1 for heavy cavalry, and +1 for their general. So that gives them a total of 3. They then lose 2 for being unformed, 2 for the casualties in the charge, and 1 for having 4 cumulative casualties. So they actually end up on -2 for their result. Then for the Allies, they simply get +1 for being veteran. So actually there'll be a net adjustment towards the Allies of 3 in this combat. Let's see what the combat results look like. Charge results. The French will get a reroll for their supporting Carabinier unit. Okay, so Allies get a 6, French get a 10. Even with modifiers, that will be a charge that will result in the French charging home. We'll just work that through. So having worked that through, so the French Carabiniers are meleeing with Elan and the British battery goes unformed. So the Carabiniers will be Elan but unformed in the charge. I've also adjusted the casualties. The French did cause 3 from their artillery fire, and of course the majority have to go to the attacking unit, but the supports then pick up any excess casualties. So that will be an allocation of 2 to the charging unit and 1 of those artillery casualties to their supporting Carabinier regiment. Okay, so we'll come back and do that combat in due course. Okay, so looking for the results of this charge, so the French get a result with a +1 for having their general attached, but then they lose 1 for being campaign cavalry, and the British light dragoons are battle cavalry, and the British get +1 for being veteran and +1 for their commander. So it's a net +2 to the British. Let's roll the charge results. We do get a re-roll for both as they both have supports. Okay, not great results for either, so that becomes a 5 plays 4. I think both are going to have a re-roll. Terrible for the British. So the British remain on 4, French are on 7. So 7 fine against 4, that's a +3, so the French get to melee with a lan, and the British melee unformed. Right, we'll move those units into melee combat. So I got a little over-exuberant there. I forgot we hadn't done the movement phase, so normal movement happened, and the French cuirassiers have moved up in support of their carabinier brethren. Yeah. I really, really do like my French heavy cavalry, I have to admit. Okay, and they have the 1st Infantry Brigade now moving forward about halfway from its baseline towards the start of the bridge and the British position. The British, meanwhile, or the Brunswickers, were hesitant, but they have started to redeploy their cavalry to allow it to support their squares, potentially do a flanking attack on the French cavalry movement here. As we look across the table, we can see the French dragoons have charged home between these two British squares. We'll see how that charge comes off. And the French cuirassiers have now fully moved up onto the ridge. But if we come across here, the French are now threatened because the British cavalry has not been idle, and the British heavy dragoons have moved up from their position on the rear of the table edge. That is one big brigade. They used their veteran status to reform into a column and have moved up to flank the cuirassiers. And the cuirassiers have had to respond by readjusting their formation slightly to stop themselves getting flank charged. And down here, swinging around the 95th Rifle Square, we've got our British light dragoons moving up in support of their heavy dragoon brethren. So another great cavalry combat about to take place in front of the 52nd. Meanwhile, the French horse artillery has decided doesn't want to get caught in those cavalry combats, unlike its British compatriots perhaps, British equivalents, perhaps that's a better word. So the French have now deployed their horse artillery battery to potentially have a go at some of those forces that it can now see on the hill as the British cavalry starts to deploy. Alright, so now we will move on to shooting, which I think will be 2 unlimbered horse artillery batteries. And that'll be it for this turn, as the British and the French horse artillery exchanges fire, having both unlimbered this turn. Okay, so firstly opening fire with the British horse artillery. See down here. So they've just unlimbered this turn, and they're going to fire over the 52nd. I think that's fine because the French are on the top of the ridge. So duck 52nd, and the horse artillery open fire. Did deploy this turn, so it's at -2, and effective range is 1 casualty on the cuirassiers. This French horse artillery battery will now also open fire. It's also at effective range against the British heavy dragoons. So this one is also at -2 as it unlimbered this turn. It's got a 6. That will also be 1 casualty. I think that's for firing. That's it for firing this turn. Then on to hand-to-hand combat with the dragoons and the carabiniers going against that foot artillery battery. Okay, so let's roll this combat. It'll be 6 dice to the French because they're meleeing with a lan, and 5 dice to the British because they are unformed but they are veterans. Alright, let's see what the French get. Wow, not a great roll. Only 1 casualty for the dragoons. Let's see if the British light dragoons can fight them off. Yeah, better result. 3 casualties for the British. So they win by 2. And in a cavalry versus cavalry combat, they take the ground and the French cavalry return to its own lines. No, got that wrong. The British cavalry return to its own lines. It's infantry that take the ground. So the British cavalry return to its own lines and the dragoons have to retreat. Okay, so the French dragoons have retreated from that combat and have gone unformed and have got a retreat marker on them. And they burst through their colleagues because they were in support range. So they've also gone unformed. And we had to take a risk to general test because there was an attached general in that melee. So an 8 is nothing. I think you need to roll a 2 or a 10, 11, 12. So the general survives and falls back with the retreating units. Okay, so this does again not look good for the British cavalry. They clearly should have withdrawn off the hill. I don't know how these rules work for withdrawing your cavalry crews into formed squares of allies. I've never found that. Perhaps I need to look a bit harder. Again, if anyone knows, let me know in the comments section. Anyway, the British have lost their second battery, it looks like it. Let's roll the results. The British, wow, they do 2 casualties on those Carabinaires. And then the Carabinaires wipe them out. 1, 2, 3, 4 casualties on the artillery, and they will then be dispersed. Okay, so let's do a recap of where we are at the start of turn 4. So we'll have to select ADCs, and the British will have a falter test for losing that artillery battery on their British brigade. We have the cavalry poised to get into combat on the hill. In the centre, the attack of the French dragoons has been repulsed, but again on the right flank, the Carabinaires have now also gained the ridge. So we'll move on with turn 4 and ADCs. Okay, we'll start off with the British. They've got a falter test on their brigade in the centre. They have given themselves a reroll on this. A 5, so they obey orders. That's good news for them. And the British brigade carries on. Then we've got rerolls on the British light cavalry brigade and the heavy cavalry brigade and the Brunswickers. So the heavy cavalry brigade is active. The light dragoons in the centre is also active, and then the Brunswickers, who have a reroll, need that reroll. They are active, probably for the first time this game. Alright, and then a roll for the Brunswick infantry, active, and that was it actually. So, all British brigades are active this turn. French have 4 ADCs, they're going for re-rolls for each one of their units. Starting with the small heavy cavalry brigade is active, the larger heavy cavalry brigade is active, the right-hand infantry brigade, and the left-hand infantry brigade, which has a re-roll, is active. Okay, so both sides are fully active. Let's just roll for initiative. Alright, the British have initiative in turn 4. Okay, 2 charges this turn. The British heavy dragoons have now charged into their cuirassier opponents on the ridgeline, and the British hussars have taken over from their light dragoon colleagues and charged into the unformed French dragoons sitting on this part of the hill. Alright, there'll be no defensive fire, we'll move straight on to charge reactions. No charges from the French this turn. They don't fancy charging into formed enemy squares. They're going to try and keep these squares pinned as their infantry continue to move forward. Okay, so looking at the charge results, the British get a +3, 1 for their general, 1 for being heavy cavalry, and 1 for being veteran. The French get +1 for being veteran. And then they and +1 for being heavy cavalry, but lose 1 for having 7 casualties. So it's a net modifier of +2 to the British. The French have a reroll, but the British don't. Okay, let's roll the results. In fact, the British should have a reroll, so I should have moved the light dragoons in support. So we'll give both of them a reroll if they need it. French have supports to the flank, British have supports to the rear. So net +2 to the British. Okay, good results for the British. They get 11, French get 8. The French are going to have a go at re-rolling that 3. 11 as well. Okay, so 11 to 11. British aren't going to use their re-roll. That still means the British win by 2. So in cavalry versus cavalry, it's just a straightforward melee. So we'll see how that melee plays out later in the turn. Okay, doing the combat result here in the centre. This again will be +2 to the British. The French are a wider formation, but thanks for pointing out, although you're wider, you have to be at least twice as wide as the opposing unit, and the French definitely aren't, so there'll be no modifier for that. The French get +1 for their general attached, but lose 1 for being unformed, so net modifier 0. British get +1 for their general, +1 for being veteran, so it's +2 for British, and actually it's +3 for the British because they are also battle cavalry. Okay, let's roll this. French do get a re-roll, but that re-roll will be at -1 if they need it, as their supporting unit is unformed. Alright, so the French will have a go at their re-roll, losing at the moment 7. That was 7 to 3. French re-roll is also a 3. That's not great, and that re-roll is actually at -1. So I don't know whether you apply that to a 1, but they go down. They've lost by. I think that is quite important, whether you re-roll to below 1. I will just go and check that, because if you do, no, it'll still be 7-2. No, 7-2 with a +3 modifier will be 10-2 or 10-3. So we have won by 7. So that is victory for the British, whatever the application of that -1 modifier is. French take an extra 1d6 casualties, so we'll roll that now. They take an extra 3 casualties, and they rout. Okay, so the rear unit here of Dragoons are now routing. There will be a risk to general test. An 8, the general is fine, but they will have to do a falter test next turn for the heavy cavalry brigade, and then the British cavalry have to charge on. So let's see how far they charge on. They charge on 13 inches, so they will go over that hedge, and they will hit that 2nd regiment of Dragoons. So the British have to charge on, which they've done, and they will do unformed, but they have now gone in to that 2nd regiment of already retreating French. No, it was retreating, but the division passed its activation test this turn. The brigade passed its activation test. So that forward French Dragoon regiment, although it was retreating last turn, had rallied, but will be unformed at this stage. So it crashes into that unformed French Dragoon regiment. Let's see what the charge result is. Okay, so the British are at +2 rather than +3 this time. They get +1 for being veteran, +1 for charging on, +1 for being battle cavalry against campaign cavalry, and +1 for an attached general, but they lose 2 for being unformed. French get a -2 modifier for being unformed. So there's a net swing of 4 to the British. I will just check that, but I think that's right. Better result for the French. So the French won't get a reroll, because I'm sure you can't get a reroll off a routing unit, and the other units in close proximity aren't from its own brigade. But a 5 + 4 takes it to 9, so that would be equal. So we will have a melee. Alright, we will fight that later in the turn. So on the left flank, the French infantry brigade has moved forward, and its horse artillery that was alongside it has also limbered up and started to move forward to try and exploit the position on the hill. On the hill, we've got the cuirassiers now in position, holding the ridgeline, forcing the squares and in hand-to-hand combat. In the centre, we've got the combat with the victorious hussars crashing into their 2nd French Dragoon unit. On the right flank, the French infantry is remorselessly advancing towards those Brunswick squares. We'll see how this turns out. But the Brunswick Lancers, as you can just see in the distance here, have also moved up, so we'll be in some more cavalry action as they try and throw these Carabiniers back. As my Brunswickers, headed by their all-hand squadron, try to throw the French cuirassiers back. Alright, that'll be combat for next turn. I don't think there's any firing, as everyone is engaged in hand-to-hand melee. British artillery battery might be able to fire at that other unit of cuirassiers. We'll have a look at that. Otherwise, we will then shortly be on to hand-to-hand combat. Okay, so fighting the combat here, British will go first. Well, combat simultaneous, but I'll roll their dice first. They get 5 dice plus 2 for being heavy cavalry and 1 for being a large unit. Both are veterans, so there'll be no adjustment to that. Wow, looks a pretty good result for the British. That's 6 casualties on the French. Right, looks like the cuirassiers could be thrown back here. They get 5 dice, and they get 7 for being heavy cavalry, and then they lose 1 for already having 7 casualties. They only cause 3 on the British, so the British have won by 3. That'll be a throwback for the French. So that was a pretty effective charge. The British heavy dragoons charged into those cuirassiers. They caused 6 casualties. They already had taken 7 from the artillery fire as they had approached this position, and from previous combats. So they were wiped out, although the British took 3 casualties, they're now on 4. So they are somewhat damaged, but they are now firmly in possession of the ridge, and the cuirassiers would also be taking a fall to test, but their dragoon brethren are already suffering from that. So there'll be it's a wipeout and a rout on this French heavy cavalry brigade. Alright, let's go and do the combat for the hussars. Okay, so this one's a straight fight off. Both will be getting 5 combat dice. The British have the advantage of being veteran, but the dragoons are a large regiment. The British didn't charge home with a lan, it's just a straightforward melee, and both are unformed, so it'll be 5 dice each. Let's roll the British casualties first. Another pretty good roll for the British, they cause 3 casualties on the French. French don't do bad, they do 3 casualties back, so that's a draw at the start of this combat. Okay, so the British brigades have allocated ADCs. All are active apart from the British right-hand brigade in squares down here at the moment. They have gone hesitant. We'll now just watch the rolls for some of the French. They've managed to get artillery assault off on their grand battery. There is some British cavalry now on the ridgeline that can be targeted. We'll now roll for the right-hand infantry regiment with a reroll, which is active. The left-hand infantry regiment is active. The cuirassiers and carabiniers are active, so everything's active so far for French. We've now got a reroll on their full to test for their large heavy cavalry brigade. A 1, that's not good. With a reroll, a 3. That's not great, I don't think. So this is a retire result for their cavalry. So retreating and routed units disperse. That's not good news. We have a couple of those. All remaining immediately retire. Close order units lose 1 casualty. And artillery withdraws, limbered. Okay. Unless they're more than 18 inches, ignore this requirement from the brigade front line, which they may well be, so our horse artillery may be alright. Okay, let's go and implement that retire result. Okay, so the left-hand French cavalry brigade is in somewhat of disarray. It's retired, the cuirassiers have fallen back off the hill, the dragoons have had to fall back even further, and the 2nd Dragoon Regiment has been destroyed, fled off table. So the British are firmly in possession from a cavalry perspective of the right flank. The French assault still going in on the left flank. The French assault still going in on the right flank. Let's see where we get to. Let's roll for initiative. And of course that French cavalry brigade is still faltering as it's still on a retire result. So that is 1 hesitant brigade each by the look of it. So -1 on both of these dice rolls. The British gain the initiative for turn 5. So over on the British left flank, the Brunswick Hussars have charged into the slightly or heavily damaged French Carabiniers, who charged and took out the British artillery battery that used to sit on this hill, and they're supported by the 2nd Hussar Regiment. And as we look across the battlefield in traditional British heavy cavalry style, the heavy dragoons, not satisfied with clearing the ridge, have charged on into the faltering cuirassiers. So that regiment there has taken several casualties, and whole brigade is faltering, and it had retired. So I'll need to check whether it's formed or unformed. I don't think that brigade was damaged at all though, so before this. Or I don't think it had just been in combat, so it should be formed, I think. We'll see how those 2 charges work out. And for the French, no charges, other than still don't fancy going into the squares, and the rest of the British cavalry, like the Hussars on the hill, are just going to have to reform this turn. So we'll get on with charge resolution in turn 5. Okay, so this will be a net +1 to the British heavy cavalry. Both have got more than 4 casualties, both the heavy cavalry with generals attached, but the French brigade is faltering. So let's see how we do. Okay, so the British will use their reroll from their resort. 8 against 10. British get the +1, I think it was, from the faltering. So that will be a -0 to -2. Cavalry versus cavalry, go straight into a melee. So that will be a melee result. Alright, we'll now do the Lancers. Okay, so we'll do the roll off for the Lancers over here as well. Both sides are on +1, both have got a support, so let's roll for the French first. They get an 8, sorry, for the British first, they get an 8. French get a 7. Let's think about a re-roll. I think we will probably both stick at that. Alright, so that will lead to our melee over there as well. Okay, so movement's all done. French infantry on the right has continued to move forward behind the Carabiniers. On the left we've stalled because of the cavalry combat taking place directly to our front, but our horse artillery is deployed again, so we'll see whether that can do any use. It's going to have a go against the dragoons on the hill, otherwise there are no targets for the British artillery to fire at, so the Grand Battery will also have a go, and that will fire for the first time in the game at long range against that Hussar regiment on the hill in the centre for the British. So we'll start off with the 2 batteries from the Grand Battery at long range against the Hussars. We get an 8. That's 1 casualty against the Hussars. Second round, a 5 will be half a casualty. So on a 4, 5, 6, that'll be a second. No, just 1 casualty against the Hussars. And then at effective range, the horse artillery will fire at the light dragoons. 3, that'll be a fatigue casualty. All this limbering and unlimbering has completely trashed, and they're exhausted, so they weren't able to get their rounds off in time. Alright, fighting the combat in the centre here. Again, the British have the advantage slightly. They get 7 dice here because they are a large unit, is the only difference between these 2 veteran heavy cavalry units fighting into combat. Alright, what we got for the British here? Not very good this time, only 2 casualties on the French. Alright, fighting back. The French, even worse, only 1 casualty caused on the British. Right, a win by 1 will be a retreat result for the Cuirassiers. Right, fighting the combat down here. Small advantage to the Carabiniers being heavy cavalry, offset to a degree by the fact they're fighting Lancers. So rolling for the Carabiniers first. What have we done? We've got 3 casualties, and then rolling for the Lancers. 3 casualties. A draw. Okay, let's see what we do. See whether we fight a second round. So the French definitely don't want to take a fall to test, so we don't want to run into a risk of losing the second round of combat. We've now taken 8 casualties on our Carabiniers, so they may well get wiped out next turn. Or indeed their dice rolls are only 6 against 6, so it would be an equal combat for the second round, because the Brunswickers have only taken 3, so they're not at their first penalty yet. So on that basis, I think we will retire with our Carabiniers. Okay, so the swirling melee continues on the right flank. The Cuirassiers on the hill have been disordered as the Carabiniers fell back through them, but they haven't broken, so the brigade is still a decent fighting formation. It's really important for both sides who gets initiative, as over on this flank here the Cuirassiers have a chance of a flank charge into the Hussars, but the dragoons who have moved up have got a chance of a counter charge, and the Lancers again, the Brunswickers, have a chance to charge into the unformed Cuirassiers on the hill. So both sides will be keen on gaining the initiative. Over on the left flank, things not looking so good for the French. British firmly in possession of the hill. The British also pinning that French brigade, and there'll be a falter test on this heavy cavalry brigade on the French side. Reserves are available for both sides if they have the ADCs, but there have been so many falter tests, no one's really had the ADCs to allocate to bring in reserves onto table. Okay, so both sides have managed to, despite re-rolls, have a hesitant brigade. The French have their artillery battery, has gone hesitant, so again can't do anything this turn. And the British again, their right-hand brigade behind the hill with all their elite troops is hesitant. Okay, so now the important roll, we have a falter test on the cavalry in the centre. They roll a 3, that's a retire. We have got a re-roll because I think a retire result will potentially take them off the table. A 1, they've gone. That heavy cavalry brigade has fled off the table. First French brigade broken. Okay, in turn 6, British have initiative. Both sides get to roll to 10, but the British only have one hesitant brigade. So let's move on with charges, turn 10. So quite a lot of charges by the British. Their allies, the Brunswickers, have again charged, this time into the unformed cuirassiers on the brow of the hill. Their light dragoons have charged into the flank of this cuirassier unit, pinning it. And because they got the jump, the hussars were then able to declare their charge, and they've gone into this flank of this column. It will be able to do a discipline test to see if it can form square. I'll do that now. 6. It goes unformed. That's not great and doesn't form square. Right. Yeah, I think that's it. Then the British heavy dragoons over here have charged again at the French attacking columns. So we've got some defensive fire to do. So I will just come around and fire the defensive volleys from 2 columns. This French cavalry unit was within 9 inches, so the French columns do not get a chance to form square. And the light dragoons are only charging in against what on the screen is the lowest of these units. Alright, so this will be firing as a column, so that'll be at half effect, but they have not moved this turn. So it'll be a standard volley, and 9 is 3 casualties and a discipline test. So that'll be 1 casualty and a discipline test on the attacking heavy dragoons, and then the supporting battalion in the checkerboard formation is within support distance, so they can definitely fire. Wow, they get 11, that's good. That's a standard volley, that's 4 casualties and a discipline test, so this is to be 2 discipline tests on these light dragoons. Now the rules say anything within range can fire in support. I'm taking that as only supporting units, therefore this horse artillery battery and the 3rd column can't actually fire at this cavalry unit. Anyway, it's received some good defensive fire, it's now got 2 discipline tests to do. It's already got 6 casualties. Yep, so first discipline test will be at -1. 9, that's fine, so it then goes up to 7, 8, 9 casualties, so the second discipline test will be at -2. 7 -2, it's veterans, so that makes it +1, so that makes it 8 -2 is 6, so it goes unformed, and we'll charge in unformed. Okay, so the French will get a reroll from their supporting units, but the British are on +1 here, charging in against the flank of this French column. They get advantage of being in column, they lose much of that advantage for being flanked, but the British also have sustained quite heavy casualties prior to the charge. Let's see where we get. 7 against 9. Okay, we will not re-roll the French. The French have won that by 1. So, cavalry versus infantry. Cavalry retires with 1 casualty and the defenders stand. Okay, so we'll retire the British cavalry. Okay, so this one, we got the advantage for the cuirassiers of being heavy cavalry, but they are being flanked, so this will give a net +1 to the British. Okay, French again win that one, so that is 11 against 6, but +1 to the British makes it 11 against 7, so that's a -4 cavalry versus cavalry. Attacker melee unformed, defender countercharges and melees with a LAN. Alright. So melee will go on, I'm quite surprised at that result. Okay, so this is a straight roll-off. The French have the advantage of being heavy cavalry, but they have been hit while unformed. So straight roll-off, but the Allies will get a re-roll. Let's see how this one turns out. Okay, Allies get a 7, French get a 4. 7 against a 3 rather, is a +3 to the Allies. Attacker will melee with a LAN, defender with melee unformed. I think the Allies will have a go at a re-roll because we might be able to break this brigade. No, exactly the same. Okay, so the defenders are already unformed, so we'll simply add a LAN to the Lancers in this combat. Okay, so now rolling for this one. This one looks like the cavalry will bounce off. The French are I've got a benefit of +6 actually, because the Allies are unformed, although they're heavy cavalry. That gets rid of most of their bonuses. They've already got 9 casualties. They took 3 casualties in the charge, and the French are in column. So let's see what the result is. 11 to the Allies, -6 is 5 against 9, so it's a -4. Cavalry versus infantry. Cavalry retires with 1 casualties and the defender stands. Okay, so we just rolled the artillery fire from the French Horse Artillery Battery. It had to go against the Light Dragoons. It's unformed them and caused a couple of casualties to them sitting on the ridgeline. Right, last action of the turn will be the melees down here. Let's kick off with the Light Dragoons into the flank of the Cuirassiers. Both units are unformed, but both units are unformed. Yeah, but the Cuirassiers are meleeing with Elan. Okay, so this one looks like it might be quite reasonable for the French. They've got, well, 6 dice versus 6 dice, and 7 dice rather. Okay, let's roll for the Allies. Not very good. Only 1 casualty for the Allies and for the French. Good result. 4 casualties for the French. There we go. So they will win by 3, which will cause the Light Dragoons to rout, I think. Winner takes the ground, loser routs. That'll be a filter test on the Light Cavalry Brigade. Okay, so this will be another very close combat. The Lancers again offsetting the effect of the French being heavy cavalry and the French being unformed. So let's roll the French casualties first. Not too great, only 2 casualties on the Brunswickers. And let's roll for the Brunswickers. Slightly better, they caused 3 casualties on the French, so they will have won that round of combat. And we did have our general with that, so we'll take a risk to general test. We roll an 8, he's fine. There was one other attack, of course, the Carabiniers also went in against this Brunswick square. Let's just roll for that one. Okay, on turn 7 the Allies have only rolled 2 ADCs, which they'll put on their Light Cavalry Brigade to try and do their filter test. The French have 3, and they need to get this attack going again, so they're going to try and go for initiative, so they're going to put re-rolls on their 3 remaining brigades. So we'll do the rolls for the French brigades first, starting with the Heavy Cavalry Brigade on the right. The right Infantry Brigade with a re-roll is active. The left Infantry Brigade with a re-roll is hesitant. Alright, so we have 1 hesitant brigade. Let me put that marker down before I forget. Then rolling the filter test for the rout result on my Light Cavalry Brigade of British in the centre. See what we get. We get a 4 for a veteran brigade, which is a rally. Alright, I think we'll take that. And then we'll move on to charges in turn 7. Okay, so French have initiative in turn 7. Let's see what charges they might declare. Okay, so the victorious Brunswicker cavalry is trying to now disrupt the French infantry brigade that's approaching its position. Given it's only suffered light casualties so far, has gone over the hedge and into the lead French battalion, while the Cuirassiers see an opportunity to break this light cavalry brigade, so they've charged down the hill at the reforming, rallying hussars that had to step back on their rally result, and their routed comrades had to leave the table. So they are a hesitant brigade, although formed, and the Cuirassiers have charged into them. So we will just do the 2 charge results. Okay, so should be alright for the French. They're on +2 here, but a negative result will not be good for the column. So let's roll the results of that French charge. Sorry, Brunswicker charge. Pretty terrible set of dice rolls, both getting 3, but the French do have at least 2 re-rolls. I'll do that again. That was 3, wasn't it? Okay, they got a 1, so that's no use, so they use their second re-roll. 4, that's not great. The Brunswickers will also use their re-roll for their supporting regiment. Terrible! Alright, so that won't charge home. There was a bit of a chance there for the Brunswickers to get a good result, given the appalling French dice rolls, but they will bounce off and take a casualty. For the Cuirassiers down here, the charge result will be at +3, so let's see how this one pans out. 6 against 8, that becomes 9 against 8, so that's a +1 charge, so they will go into melee. So straightforward melee. We'll see how that turns out at the end of the turn. Okay, so finally for the turn we'll do the hand-to-hand combat as the Cuirassiers charge into the hussars. Okay, so roll for the French. we've got just 2 casualties. Rolling for the Hussars, none. French win by 2. I think it's the end of the Hussars. Hussars, the French return to own lines, and the losers retreat off the table. So the French have definitely broken the light cavalry brigade. Okay, so all brigades are active apart from the French heavy artillery. Let's roll for initiative. French have initiative on turn 9. Don't think there are any charges this turn. Chance for them to move their infantry assault forward. Okay, so the French attack's now rolling forward. They've captured the ridgeline, supported by one of their regiments of Carabiniers and a Cuirassier regiment that's fallen back this turn and be able to start moving forward. In response, the Brunswickers have moved out of square, formed themselves into line, and their cavalry units have reformed at the back. They're still relatively strong, so they may be able to hold back this attack for a while. On the other flank, the other French brigade is moving forward again, but the British defence on that flank looks very strong. And the British do have the possibility of bringing on their KGL brigade, which is also very strong, to support the Brunswickers. So we'll see how this goes in turn 9. Time for firing. Nothing from the French as their artillery battery is hesitant. The British will fire their battery up at the Carabiniers. There'll be a long range shot on them at the hill. And it gets an 11. That's pretty good going. There we go. That's an 11, which at long range is 2 casualties and a discipline test. So we'll roll the discipline test on the Carabiniers. They've only got 1 casualty so far, so that'll take them up to 3. And 7 is good enough for them to stay in position on the hill. Alright, and now the Brunswicker battalions are going to fire 3 inferior volleys, 1 against each of the attacking French battalions. Let's roll these. So there'll be inferior volleys because the Brunswickers have moved, or there'll be a standard volley from the one on the end, but half effect because it's in column. So we'll start with the inferior volleys, working from right to left. So first shot is a 7. It's 1 casualty against the 1st battalion. An 11, that's pretty good. That's 3 casualties and a discipline test against the next one. Some dice down. 3 and a discipline test, and then a half effect standard volley. A 5 won't be anything, I don't believe. That's only 1 casualty, half effect, it'll be nothing. So a discipline test on this brigade in the middle, battalion in the middle. That's an 11, they're absolutely fine. Let's mark those casualties up there. Okay, so both armies are on a -1, rolling for initiative. The French allocated 3 ADCs to bring the guard light cavalry on and managed to fail their reroll, so they were burnt. The Allies managed to get artillery assault off on their horse artillery battery, which are going to carry on trying to break those Carabiniers that are trying to pin the Brunswickers on the hill. Okay, Allies have got initiative. Let's move on with turn 10. Okay, so this looks like make or break for the French. 3 columns have charged in. The Brunswicker on the left continues to be pinned by the Carabiniers, just sitting behind the hedge up there. And the infantry brigades are now trying to attack and break the Allied hold on the ridge. We will do defensive fire and then do the charge results. Starting with the right-hand battalion, that will fire first for the Allies. This will be a standard volley as they haven't moved this turn. That's a 6. Won't be brilliant, that'll be 1 casualty. Next battalion will fire. That's better, that's a 9. That'll be 3 casualties and a discipline test. They're on 6 now, so that'll be hard work for them. And then the square will fire, but it'll be a half effect. That's a 5, that'll be nothing. Alright, let's just do that discipline test. That'll be a discipline test at -1 for that middle column. That's a 7 at -1 is a 6, so they go unformed, but the charges will continue. Let's do the charge results as well. Okay, so we're doing the first assault here. No adjustments, it'll be a straight roll-off. French do have support though. A 6 for the Allies and a 6 for the French. We'll use one of our support die rolls. It's an 8 against a 6. There'll be a charge result of +2, 1 to 2. Attacker melees with elan, defender will melee unformed. Okay, we'll now do the second one. That will be exactly the same. There's a possibility of a French support here as well. We've got a general which will offset the extra casualties, so it'll be a straight die roll off for the first one. 11 for the Allies and 8 for the French. Do we want to use that re-roll? I think we do. We'll re-roll a 3. Okay, so we get a 9. So 11 against 9, that's a test at -2. Attacker will do a volley and they're in columns, and that's just 1 dice. That does no effect and they stop. And then for the final assault, we threw the Brunswicker general in to try and offset the fact that we're in square. So there's a +1 for the French on this die roll, no supports for either side. That's good, that's 12, and that'll be a destiny test as well for the French. And the, for the Brunswickers, and the French lose by -6, so they retreat with 1d3 casualties. So they take 1 casualty and will be retreating. Let's do the destiny test. That's an 8 on the destiny table. That is, we'll cover 1 front casualty, or melee with a land, or change formation. I think they'll stay where they are, and we'll just apply the retreat result. So we've completed movement in turn 11, and the French battalions have reached the ridgeline. The 95th Rifles continue to plink away and cause some casualties on them. In the centre, the French Heavy Cavalry Brigade is starting to reform with its effective units to apply pressure on the gap in the Allied centre. And we've got the hand-to-hand combat to do as the French assault on the other flank tries to push the Brunswickers away. We'll come back and do the hand-to-hand combat for the last act of turn 10. Okay, a straight roll off. The French get 6 dice because they're attacking with a land. The Brunswickers only get 4 because they're unformed. Wow, that's pretty good from the French. That's 5 casualties. Looks like they've beaten the Brunswickers. Well, pretty good from the Brunswickers. They've scored 3, but they will have lost that combat. And that unit will have to retire or retreat off the table. Okay, turn 12 is getting to the crunch. The Brunswick Lancers have charged into the attacking French columns. The Brunswicker line infantry has also moved forward and charged the attacking French column as it had initiative. The square remains pinned by the French cavalry. On the other flank, the French columns have charged into the 52nd Light. We'll see how that combat goes as we move on in turn 12 of the game. First we'll do the defensive volley from these French columns that are under attack. Firstly, this column here, an 8 for a standard volley is 3 casualties, so that reduces to 1 casualty on the cavalry. Okay, the next column, charged by the Brunswick line. That's a 6 at half effect, will be nothing. And then we've got a defensive volley from the Brunswick square against the attacking French column. Does nothing. Alright, so none of those will have an effect on the combat results, as they're all less than 2. Alright, we'll now do a defensive volley on the 52nd line from the other side of the table. This will be a superior volley against the French. That's an 8. A superior volley is 3 casualties and a discipline test. Alright, so we have to allocate those probably between the 2 attacking columns. I don't know whether they don't count as mass columns because they're too far apart. So we'll allocate them between the 2 columns, but we will do a discipline test of 1. That's a 4. That's not good. I will just apply that. Okay, so we'll roll for the charges first. We've got the Brunswick Cavalry charging into the French column. They are supported, so you will get a re-roll. You're going to throw your general in? What did you get?
Yep.
A 6?
I'm going to ruin my 2.
A 10, okay.
I get +1 for my general.
Yeah,
11.
that's right.
I get +1 for being Lancer charging in.
That's right.
6. Is there anything else?
Infantry a column against square or cavalry, so that will apply to my result. So I've got no supports in this one as my supporting
It's
units
just
are too far
+2
away.
for you.
So I get a 9 plus 2 is an 11.
I win by 1.
Yeah, so how many casualties have I got, Charlie?
5 minus 1. I win by
So
2.
you win by 2. That's it. So cavalry versus infantry. Win by 1 to 2. You melee with a land, and I melee unformed. Do you want to get the counters? Okay, so in the centre.
Does that do anything because it's a square?
So I'm on -1 because I have 6 casualties, but I have thrown my general into this one, so
Me
that
too.
offsets it. You're putting
Actually,
I put your general into
yeah,
the square.
I'll put it in the square.
Yeah. All right. So rolling for the French. We've got an 8.
8.
Okay, so that's a draw. I get +1, so I
No,
win by 1.
You get minus.
But -1, yeah, that's right. So it's a draw. So it's just a straightforward melee there. And then against the square, I only get a 5.
7. I'm going.
You get +1 for having your general attached. I get, but you get -2 for being in a square.
What do you want?
5.
I win by 2. I'm on 7.
So -2, so it's a straightforward melee. So you move me into combat.
Should I put it out? Should I put it?
No, you leave them in the square because they've charged in the square. All
I
right.
thought, no, wait, did I win by 2 then? Isn't it a LAN?
No, not at -2. You have to be more than 2 different.
Okay. Oh, up here.
Okay, so you are elite +2. You're touching your general.
Yeah.
+3.
That's my elite combat.
You've got support from the 95th Rifles.
Yeah. Plus.
So that's just a re-roll.
I'm
how
a
many
high
casualties? You've got no
I'm a high
casualties.
morale.
And
Because you're already line.
yeah, but you just get +2 for being elite. Yeah.
So how many?
So it was +3, wasn't it? +2 for being elite and +1 for having your
Yeah.
general attached. Okay, I will get +1 for having my general attached, but I'm unformed.
Ooh, 10. I want to see what happens if I re-roll
So
it.
7 for one and 7 for the other. I've got a re-roll, so I'm going to re-roll this one. I'm on an 11. I'm not going to. I'm going to re-roll that one as well. No, that's this. So my best is 11, but that's on my unformed unit. So I lose 2 for being unformed, but I've got my general attached, so I go up by 1.
So
I'm on
I'm on
10.
12 because I get +3 because I had 10 +3. It's 13.
Yep. So you melee with a LAN. No, I'm attacking, aren't I? I'm melee unformed, you countercharge and melee with a LAN.
Doesn't change for you because you're already unformed.
Yeah, the other battalion goes unformed as well for me. So okay, so Charlie's now opening fire
Artillery
with his
assault.
artillery against my carabiners. That was from a previous turn, Charlie. I'm afraid it's just normal artillery fire. It's at long range. That's pretty good. 9 at long range is 1 casualty and a discipline test.
-1.
What are they on there?
7.
Okay, so test at -1. But so it's a normal test because they're veterans. So you need to get. I need to get a 7 on this. 7 or more. 12. Yep, they're fine.
So I'm good.
Any more firing? I don't think you've got any more firing. I pushed your skirmishers back this turn. 95th Rifles can't see anyone. Everything else fired as we
You can't
charged in.
re-fire
I can't
'cause
fire out anything, so can't see anything with my artillery.
So, no.
So we're on to hand-to-hand combat. Should we start with the
This one.
attack on the hill? Yeah.
So
Could you just go and check how many casualties I've got on my 2 infantry battalions out there, Charlie?
this one's got 2. That one.
It's got quite a lot, I think.
I didn't do a casualty or something. It's got 5.
Okay, so that starts with 5 dice, that one. It loses
Wait,
1
if
for
I
being
win, Dad,
unformed
if I win this
and 1
com-
for the casualties.
If
The other
no-
one has 4.
No, only 1 can move in. You can only bring in 2 in a village.
It's not a village.
Yeah, so you can't bring in 2.
No, I'll just check the rules, but I think it's all right.
And
We've just remembered we don't have infantry assault, so we can only attack with the 1 battalion.
So I get
So I just get 3 dice.
So I get +1 for a lamb.
Yes.
And +1 for being elite. Plus
I think it's more actually. You're elite, yeah. +1 for being elite.
and +1 more because I'm a high morale grade, and because you're just
2 more
nine.
because you're 2 higher morale grade.
Also, I get 9 dice. I get the max amount of dice.
Yeah, and I only get 3. I think I'm going to get thrown back.
You might just get thrown.
I do cause 2 casualties.
Oh, I do 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 casualties.
All right. Okay, that brigade's nearly gone. And that's you've won by 4, so I rout. Okay, let's do the hand-to-hand combat down here. Let's start with the lancers, Charlie.
So I get 1 dice for being a lancer.
You get 5 dice to start with. You get lancers, formed lancers against foot. You actually get 2 extra dice, Charlie.
Yeah. Is it because you're in columns? It's more.
No, it's just because you're it's going against foot. Against cavalry, you get +1. You're the same morale grade. You've got 6 casualties. He's got 5, so we both lose 1 dice. So I start with 5, so I'm back down to 4. You're a land. I'm on form, so I'm down to 3. Okay, you ready to go?
Yeah. Well, I have 7 now.
So I get 1 casualty.
I do 3.
3 casualties, so you win by 2. And it's cavalry versus infantry. Losing infantry, disperse. So that'll be a falter test on this brigade.
Oh, I've got 2 falters on you.
Yeah, I know. All right.
So I'll just put them like that, so they look like they're dispersed.
Well, no, I have to take them off the table. You've worked the whole unit out. Put the extra casualty on the Brunswick Lancers.
I just had.
Okay, let's do the next one then. So we've got the Brunswickers charging this French column. So I start with 5 units, and I lose 1 because I've got 6 casualties. I don't think you've got any casualties.
No.
I think you just get 5, Charlie. Okay, roll for the French. That's 2 casualties. For the Brunswickers.
2.
All right. So I get to choose as to whether I fight another round of combat. How many casualties am I on now?
8.
All right. I'm already faltering. Ooh, this is a tough choice. I think I'm the defender. I think I'm going to retire here.
I thought you wouldn't, because you don't want to get another falter test, because that means you'll just be able to do another one soon.
Okay, and then finally I attack the Brunswick square.
I'm on a LAN.
No, you're not on a LAN. Not for attacking the square. You put your general in though. But you did that for the charge results, didn't you?
It's just 5 and that's it.
So I get 5 and
no casualties. That's cavalry.
No, I think it's just 5 against 5. French only get 1.
3.
3. Okay, so you win by 2. Infantry versus infantry.
Surprisingly, the square's been quite effective.
Retreat and you take the ground. All right, that's been pretty disastrous for the French attack this turn. Looks like there's some falter tests.
It's been very effective.
Yeah, it shouldn't be that effective against a formed unit, but I was unlucky not to win the charge test. All right, let's do the implementation. So a pretty devastating turn for the French this turn. The the Brunswick Lancers have destroyed a unit in this French infantry brigade. You've got 2, I think one of those battalions is retreating because the other one was retreating last turn. So we'll take that off. One is retreating, one's been dispersed, so there's a falter test on this brigade. And the Brunswickers are advancing forward.
I gave you a falter marker.
Yeah, thank you very much. And on the other brigade, again, there was a rout result. So there's another falter test on that French brigade. And it's all looking fairly rosy for the British. Let's do ADCs. We'll do these 2 ADC tests and see what the game's looking like at the end of turn 13, the beginning of turn 13. So rolling for ADCs. So I only get 2, but I have my off-table brigade still. No, I only got 2. You've got 1 off-table brigade, Toby. Charlie?
Sorry. All of them?
Well, you know, because you've already rolled them once. What did you roll the first time?
I got 3 of them.
Okay, and then you got 1 more from our off-table, which we'll take. So you've got 4 ADCs then, Charlie, and I've got 2. That's going to be tough because I'm going to have to allocate those to my faltering brigades, and I get no re-rolls. So this could be bad news for the French. Alright, so this is make or break for the French. We could lose 3 brigades here. We've already lost 1 of our heavy cavalry brigade. So this falter test on this infantry brigade, a 5. That's pretty good. That's an obey orders, so they're all right. Okay, and then on the other brigade,
2.
It's a 2. That's not good. That's a retire result, and they stay faltering. I'll just go and move those. Okay, so me and Charlie have decided we're going to call it there. The French victory conditions are to break 3 Allied brigades, including 1 British brigade. I can't see that's going to happen. There's only 3 turns remaining. The French Heavy Cavalry Division is not in great shape. The 3 regiments have taken 7 casualties on the Carabiniers, 6 on this Chasseur regiment and 2 on the other, Cuirassier regiment and 2 on the other Cuirassier regiment. So not an awful lot more offensive power left in those. A little bit, enough to keep the British in square, but not to stop much. The Brunswickers are still in reasonably healthy position and well supported by their cavalry, and this brigade assault in the centre is not in great shape. One of the battalions has taken 8 casualties. I can't see it breaking two Allied units in only 3 turns left.
And also
and on the other flank,
on this flank, I think they might, if they fall back another game, like if they get Savvy Keeper or anything lower than 4,
yeah,
I might be able to move my elite troops into your flank and maybe take out your cavalry. And
I don't think you can take out my cavalry because I'm too far away. So I don't think. But then the British don't have to break any French units. They just have to prevent themselves from breaking. And half of the French attacking formation is now gone. They've got 1 brigade retiring and still fortering. They lost their other heavy cavalry brigade, so the French force is down to half strength. So I think we have to conclude that Neys cavalry attacks haven't been able to break the British position at Waterloo. It's all down to what the Old Guard can achieve. Hope you've enjoyed the game, and we'll see you again next time when the Old Guard will bring Napoleon final victory, or perhaps Charlie will be supreme.
Proven, even if they did win, they wouldn't be able to go against the Prussian and the rest of the whole British army, so they would have lost definitely now.
Well, anyway, there's your British general speaking. All right, hope you enjoyed the game, guys, and we'll see you again next time. Bye.